And then we named a bunch of muscles in hopes that this will help you prepare for the lab night. The week before that, we did muscle tissue. And I've already posted the exam review questions, and people have been coming by to ask questions about those questions. There's some redundancy in the presentation, but you need to know the 4 functional characteristics of muscle: excitability, contractility, extensibility, and something else. And then the sliding filament theory or whatever story for muscle contraction. I want you to know that too. SR, T-tubules, myosin, active troponin, triple myosin, calcium, and ATP are the major players for that story. And then the 4 steps of muscle contraction. If you've got your review sheet, pull it out. If you don't have it, you should be printing that. Why'd I give it to you? I gave it to you so you could print it and bring it to class, right? The 4 steps of muscle contraction. Excitation. Excitation, contraction, coupling. And I made the observation, I thought that was the coolest of the 4 steps. How do we convert electrical signals into something physical? And that's mediated by calcium. Then contraction was step 3. I hear the conversation here. Step 3 has 4 steps. Cross bridge formation and all that stuff. Don't get confused. The 4 steps of muscles contracting. Excitation, EC coupling, contraction, and relaxation. And then we said step 3, contraction, has 4 phases. What are the 4 phases to the contraction step? It's confusing. The verbiage is confusing, which is why it's worth mentioning in the review. Those 4 steps were cross bridge formation, power stroke, cockpit detachment, and recocking or something, right? And those steps are mediated by the cleavage of ATP. Power stroke, I think.
You have to know the
No, I don't need those 4 sub-steps on my short answer story. I'm mentioning it because people get confused. Could there be a question on the multiple choice about those? Sure. Should you know them? Yeah. But that's not the right answer for the 4 steps. The 4 steps are excitation, contraction, coupling, contraction, and relaxation. And then I also asked you to specifically be able to say what the T-tubules do and what the SR does. And there were some other things, types of contraction, isometric, isotonic, and other thoughts. Questions before we go for the new stuff? When you have questions, and probably most of you should have at least a question or 2, make sure you get it answered before next Thursday, right? Okay. You got to finish strong. We spent time last week going over everybody's grades. I hope no one's withdrawing, but the drop deadline is next week on Wednesday. We got a lot of time before the next test. Start studying, start studying, start studying. Keep studying. All right. So we'll do what we always do first and mention what are the objectives, what are we trying to accomplish for this unit. Functions of nervous system and general nervous system organization. Okay. The good news, I can also say this about what we're doing from now until the end of the semester. It's all nervous system from here on in. Why is that good? As I've said 1,000 times now, you learn by repetition. So we're going to frame the nervous system story today and then dig into the details and the nuances of it for the next month. Hopefully that practice that you get with me will help you be more successful on the last exam and will translate over to your success on the final. Okay, and then what else? Basics of neurophysiology, we've already kind of done that, right? Everyone should have already drawn the action potential graph, and you should be thinking right now when I say action potential graph, something about sodium, potassium, resting memory potential, and ion moving, and so on. And then at the end, about neural integration and how the nervous system is organized, what kind of circuits are formed, how does it work? And then of course that transitions into what we'll do on the next unit with spinal cord, brain, autonomic nervous system, and special senses. Let's talk about the little divisions afterwards. Nervous system's cool. I can't remember if I said to you yet or not. If you're trying to figure out something to do with your careers, and you want to go into a field where we still don't know lots of stuff, this is one of them. We kind of know what there is to know, generally speaking, about some of the other systems. Bones are cool. We've got that pretty well figured out. Muscles are really cool. That's my favorite thing. We know a lot about muscles. There's still a lot we don't know, but we know a lot. Nervous system is still a huge mystery. We know less than we know. Does that make sense? Yeah. There's still way more to be discovered than what we already know. The immune system's the other really fascinating system. There's still lots of undiscovered territory. And as the population ages, which it is aging, there will be lots of employment opportunities and taking care of people that will ultimately get these degenerative diseases that are just associated with living a long life. No one got Alzheimer's disease because no one lived that long. Now everyone lives that long. All right. So this seems like an easy short answer question, doesn't it? Name and briefly describe. Name and briefly describe the three nervous system functions. Input, integration, output. Input, integration, and output. I'm sure there's a cartoon picture of this on the next slide. We just draw this. Let's all draw it now, right? 3 steps. All right. I've got some colors. Inputs. Inputs are what kind of information? Sensory. Where is sensory information coming from, generally speaking? Name a sensory input.
Hearing.
Okay, sound, hearing. All the special senses are really easy, right? Vision, taste, smell, balance, equilibrium, and hearing are the 5. So where did all that information come from? Outside the body, right? Sensory information comes from far away places, which can either be outside the body or distant places inside the body. Sensory information comes from the periphery. So we could draw a sensory neuron with an axon somewhere out in the periphery, and information is going to be sent where for this step number 2? The brain and spinal cord, right? So my number 2 box is going to be brain, spinal cord, or we could just say central nervous system, right? Integration and processing of information happens in 2 places. I wanted to start today with a video, but I got distracted with the quiz. I'll show it to you at the end. 5 minutes or something. Actually, I'll show it to you in the middle. Information is processed in 2 locations. Fascinating. If I asked you generally right now, where is information processed? Everyone would probably say the brain. Did you know that information is being processed in your spinal cord? Also, some information is processed in the spinal cord, and that's the end of the story. The spinal cord has the capacity to make decisions. Just a weird thing to think about. Usually you think about making decisions as some conscious control thing that you get to decide. Not true. Not exclusively true. There's also some million odd number of neurons that are in your gut. Your digestive system has a nervous system. It's called the enteric nervous system. And it functions separate from the brain too. Can the brain tell it what to do? Yeah. Does the brain tell the spinal cord what to do? Yeah. The ultimate planner and processor of information for sure is my brain. But there are other locations in the body where information is integrated, processed, and decisions are made outside of my conscious control. Interesting. So again, I'm integrating and processing, deciding if I want to do something about it, and then ultimately outputs. Right? So these would come from a motor neuron. Outputs are motor. Sensory are inputs. I want to put two more words here, fancy vocabulary words, in terms of what's the pathway. So there's vocabulary words, like anatomical vocabulary words that we did at the beginning. There's two more words. Information going towards someplace, towards, it's called the afferent pathway. Information, the word means towards. T-O-W-A-R-D-S, towards. Write it. Afferent, the word means towards. In this case, sensory information is going towards what? The CNS, right? So the word is afferent pathway. Information going towards the CNS travels along circuits that are called afferent pathways. And that information going towards the CNS is always sensory information. Now, outputs are always going to be motor information, and they travel along this word, efferent pathways. So efferent means what? Not towards, but away. Away from what? The CNS, right? There you go. Learn these words, you'll see them again. Not just from me, but you'll see them again in Andrew. These are, again, basic vocabulary words. They mean towards and away. These are words that are more like proximal and distal. I need a point of reference. Towards what? Away from what? We always have to ask that question with these words. You guys got it? You draw something like this for me, I'll give you points. You tell me which pathway is afferent, which pathway is efferent, I give you 2 extra credit points. So this would be an easy 246 or 369, one for each. You could see how to permutate this in terms of points per part of the circuit.
On the secondary processing centers like digestive and stuff,
Yeah.
it's always unconscious. Or do they have to do with sensory information as well?
They do monitor. So the enteric nervous system primarily monitoring absorption of nutrients and the nutrient environment in the body. Again, it is secondarily controlled by the CNS, but they've done studies where they've, spinal cord damage, the enteric nervous system still functions. So aside from the brain, that group of neurons function independently. So people say second brain, there's arguments about whether or not that's proper nomenclature or not, but it can function autonomously. But it is, of course, modulated by the CNS. Okay, and you can read the rest of that for yourselves. Motor outputs are 2 things. Easy to think about motor outputs being controlling skeletal muscles, but motor outputs also regulate glandular secretions and regulate things like the enteric nervous system, heart rate, respiration rate, and so on. Those are still motor outputs, even though I don't consciously control them. I can't be like, I'd like my heart rate to go up 5 beats per minute. That's not how it works. But the brain does have influence. And you'll talk about all those things when you move into MP2 and start focusing on the peripheral body systems. We talk about how does the hormonal system influence heart rate, how does the nervous system influence heart rate, and so on. 2 control centers, nervous, endocrine. That's it. Right. I'm already thinking of the next semester. What are the 2 mechanisms so that your body can control stuff? There's only 2. We're doing one of them right now, nervous. The other one is the first thing you guys will do in MP2 here, and that's the endocrine system. There's only 2 ways to control your body, hormones and nervous impulses. All right, so here's the cartoon. Nothing earth-shattering here. We'll move on. How is it organized? We've made some of these observations already. CNS and PNS. And this is the basics. We definitely want to make sure we get these pieces into our minds as we're going to migrate through the parts of the CNS and the parts of the PNS in future chapters. Again, you'll like this unit in that there is that overlapping material. We start with jumping all over the place. Now we focus. So the CNS is, of course, the brain and spinal cord. We made the observation about integration, command, control, decision-making happening here. PNS, these are the axonal bundles, and they are called nerves. There are also clusters of sensory neurons located outside the body. Those clusters are called ganglia. Okay? There are clusters of sensory neuron cell bodies. They are not located in the CNS. They are located in the PNS. And because they sit, we'll add this later, we're going to revisit this later, so you don't have to understand the whole thing now. They sit in clusters on the dorsal part of the spinal cord, outside of it. And so they're called dorsal root ganglia, or DRG. The main site of sensory neurons, the somas, the cell bodies, they're not in the CNS. They're part of the peripheral nervous system. They sit right on the outside of the spinal cord, on the dorsal side, the back side. So they're called dorsal root ganglia. Again, these are the communication lines, and you're aware probably of these 2 divisions, afferent and efferent. Now we've already used those words. So information is going to be sent towards the CNS, that's sensory information. Other information being sent away from the CNS, efferent. You start to see how it's organized, right? I meant to make this point earlier and I forgot. I look at something like this, and I see classic homeostatic feedback loops, right? We did that very beginning of AP1 back in, what is the spring sort of term, so January. Monitoring some change in the environment, processing that information, making a decision over output. Remember that? That was a short answer question on the first exam. I told you, I got a plan, right? I got a plan. I look at this and I go, oh, right, there it is again. This is the classic homeostatic feedback circuitry. bit more about the PNS and what about these divisions? Sensory. Again, the word is afferent. There's two places I can receive information. These are new words, right? Make sure you get the words. If you get the words, the story becomes easy. The words are somatic and visceral. These are words you're going to continue to use. Somatic, the word soma, S-O-M-A, we're going to see in a minute means body. Soma means body. So the somatic division is interested in sensory information coming from the body. And you just have to agree with the semantics here of how we operationally defined the word body. It means skeletal muscles, skin, and joints. Yep. So the word body here, again, becomes user-defined. We made it up. We decided the word somatic is in reference to skeletal muscle, skin, and joints. And then visceral, basically then, is for everything else. And what is everything else in you? If it's not skin, muscles, or joints, it's then your internal organs. So now that's visceral. And we often refer to these as the visceral organs. You might have heard that before. So this would be information coming from my digestive system, my stomach, my liver, my kidneys, like that. Yeah, the other organs. Heart, lungs, all these other organs. Everything that's not skin, muscles, and joints is visceral. And then for the efferent, motor output stuff, same words. You'll see later there's somatic efferents and visceral efferents as well. So obviously if I'm receiving sensory information from these organs, I probably want to be able to control them in some fashion. And so there's motor outputs going to all these places. Motor outputs going to the skin. Motor outputs going to joints. Motor outputs going to skeletal muscles. And the same is true for all the visceral organs as well. We can modulate the functionality of all these structures. Okay. Yeah, that's a redundant slide, isn't it? Here we go with the efferent. As I mentioned, efferent has this somatic component. So this is still PNS. If you got the slides, we're still talking about the peripheral nervous system. And we're still talking about the general architecture. How is it organized, generally? We have a somatic efferent division. And mostly I'm thinking about controlling skeletal muscles. Yeah, voluntary. And then we have this autonomic. The visceral part is called autonomic now. Your involuntary outputs. Again, I can't consciously think about my heart beating faster or slower and make it so. Unless you're like some awesome secret Navy SEAL operator guy or something. And even that's not like really conscious, right? So the autonomic nervous system it's written on there. You can see what it's being controlled. What's being controlled? Glands, blood vessel diameters. If I change the size of the blood vessel lumen, what am I doing? Why do I want to make a blood vessel, the hole, bigger or smaller? You can regulate blood flow, right? What I'm trying to do now is, I want you to be able to think this out for yourselves. Autonomic nervous system is what is very commonly and kind of incorrectly now referred to as fight or flight. And when I heard fight or flight, the first time I thought that fight or flight were opposites. I'm either going to fight, and that's one set of commands, or I'm going to fly away, and that's a different set of commands. But that's not true. Fight or flight is the same thing. And the other part is called rest digest. It's more accurately depicted by the little cartoon. So I can either fight the tiger, or I can run away from the tiger. Either way, I want to do the same thing. Right? What do I want to do? What changes to my body would enable me to fight a tiger? What about my heart rate? Up. What about respiration rate? Up. How about blood pressure? It's going to go up. Blood flow to skeletal muscles. Probably up, right? Not probably, definitely. Is that going to, if I want more blood to go to my skeletal muscles, am I going to make the hole bigger? Or am I going to make the hole smaller? Bigger, right? That's called vasodilation. The larger the hole, the more volume of blood flows through it. You know this. Works just like a hose. What about blood flow to my digestive system? Up or down? Sure, down. So how do I do that? Not vasodilate, but vasoconstrict. Right. So fight or, and there's also some other metabolic things happening here in terms of mobilizing glucose reserves and mobilizing fat reserves. So I'm going to make new glucose, and I'm going to do lipolysis and burn stored fat, make it available because I need to run away or I need to fight the tiger. I like tiger. And there's hormonal control here. Epinephrine, norepinephrine. Those are versions of it. Those are much more long-term active forms of a hormone you know called adrenaline. Cortisol is another one. Now I'm thinking about AMP2 too much right now. The stress response hormones. And usually I say, I have to tell you, you know how I get. The problem is, are there any tigers today that you've ever had to run away from? No. If you have even seen a tiger, it's because you went to zoo. But is there stress in your lives? Oh yeah. Bills, school, kids, work. The problem is these stresses don't typically go up and down, do they? The tiger, either you get away or you don't. Either way, the stress is mediated, right? The problem is, with a modern lifestyle, the stress is constant in most people's lives. And most people have poor stress management skills. Coupled with the fact that there's just a ton of stress. Right? What happens when you turn on anything for too long? Bad or good? Bad. Okay. The rest of that story is for a different day. What can you do to lower your stress? Can I plug it? Can I plug it again today? You betcha. Exercise lowers stress. Oh yeah. All right. So does yoga, meditation, stretching, some quiet woosah time. Find some for yourself. Bad Boys. Did you guys see that movie? Bad Boys. Woosah. Remember your pressure points, Captain. I like that movie. You get the idea. I want to know the words. Sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic activates the body systems. Parasympathetic turns them off. I don't know how you remember that. Sympathetic activates, parasympathetic deactivates. And we made some observations about how it works. Again, you can think this through for yourselves. What do you want to do if you need to run away from a tiger? Walk through the steps, right? Skeletal muscles, yeah, more blood, heart rate up, and so on. So parasympathetic does the opposite. It lowers heart rate. It decreases blood flow to skeletal muscles. It increases blood flow to digestive systems. You can think about it like this too. When you're exercising high intensity, are you like, gee, I need to go pee? No, because you're not making urine, right? Blood flow to the kidneys is decreased when you're activated systems. After you finish working out though, or finish playing ball or whatever it is, practice, oh man,